Hello everyone, it's 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐸, and today I'm listening to the new Injury Reserve album, By the Time I Get to Phoenix. Back in 2016 I heard Oh Shit. Can't remember how I came across it now, but I definitely remember thinking, wow, these guys sound like the future. I remember when I first heard this thinking, I don't feel like I've heard that combination quite before. That hard, heavy, exciting, youthful, and really interesting production. The music was clearly supposed to get you hype, and yet there was also this hint of melancholy about it. The next year they followed up with an EP called Drive It Like It's Stolen, and I was pretty convinced that this EP was going to make them big. The singles, All This Money, and especially See You Sweat, they just seemed so timely and catchy. Ritchie with a T seemed to be a master of hooks. I was surprised that they didn't get bigger off the back of those tracks. I suppose this is, the sound of this is stranger than I remembered. So of course I was very excited for the release of their debut album that came out in 2019. I was hoping that this would be their big moment. And again, it did have some incredible singles, especially Jailbreak the Tesla, which did actually do pretty well. And then there was Jawbreaker, which seemed to point to a more experimental direction for the group. This song was pretty strange compared to their earlier stuff. But I didn't feel the album was quite the perfect artistic statement I was hoping for from them. It was good, really good actually, but it definitely left me thinking, well, maybe their next album will be their masterpiece. So last year, I was pretty devastated when I heard about the passing away of Steppa J Groggs. Really a tragic loss, especially for such a great artist, so young. And I also thought, damn, now we'll never get their masterpiece. We've lost Groggs before they could get it done. Shit. But then a month ago, Injury Reserve announced this new album. And even better, they did start work on it with Groggs. So I'm left thinking, perhaps we're going to get their masterpiece after all. Seems like there's a chance. And when I heard the single Knees, well, damn, it definitely seemed like something special was on the way. The reception has been rapturous, and the same goes for the second single they put out, Superman That, which sounded pretty chaotic. But both singles have been really well received. Hype for the album is massive, so let's get into the album. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button for me, and follow me over on Twitch if you'd like to join me to listen to this album again, and many others. So as soon as track 1, Outside, begins, you can tell that something rather different is happening, as the spoken word is gradually smothered in layers of synthesizers. The sound is so thick. It's funny though, because in retrospect, the thickness of the sound was only just getting started. But from the very beginning, they present this new, very ambient sound. Ambient, and yet there's so much going on. It's hard to know whether to focus my brain on the vocals or on the synthesizers or going all around it. They just keep adding more and more unexpected layers of sound, creating something pretty alien to rap music. This isn't even hip-hop, is it? What the hell is this? Some kind of drone house? Not that it doesn't have any precedent at all, but the mood feels pretty unique. And that vibrantly strange environment continues into track 2, which is the second single, Superman That. The same thing happened to me this time as when I first heard the single last week. I was convinced that there was no rhythm to the song, at least for the first half or so. But as it goes on, I realized there is a pattern. You can follow it. It's just so noisy that the pattern that emerges is almost completely smothered. It's really compelling. I loved the song from first listen though, and loved it even more now, for how it manages to express so much through all the chaos. The next song, SS San Francisco, holds some rhythm in place, this time using a post-punk-like bass line, that in fact kind of reminded me of what Danny Brown was doing on Atrocity Exhibition.
Where they change the time up, where they 440 to it.
And this song actually features 𝐒𝐿oopers, who's a member of Danny Brown's Bruiser Brigade. And he got a fair bit of attention for his album Van Gogh's Left Ear that came out earlier this year in July. I haven't heard that album yet, but it seems pretty interesting, and his verse on this definitely got me intrigued. But even if there is a rhythm to this track, it often feels to me like everything else about the music, including the MC's performances, are doing everything they can to dismantle it and even distract you from it, just leaving everything feeling really off kilter.
I don't think she get it. She's just too hard-headed.
Track 4, Footwork in a Forest Fire, is fucked up, noisy as hell, in a way that I think you can only really compare to Death Grips. I don't think Injury Reserve have ever done anything quite this bizarre, even if they were heading towards stranger pastures on their last album. This just sounds completely out of control. It's really dark, even a bit frightening. And this fucked up mood continues into the next song, Ground Zero. Like I said, you can definitely get an idea of how they got here when you listen to some of the stranger stuff on their self-titled album like Jawbreaker. But they've just taken it so much further than I ever would have even hoped for. It's really going into levels of abstraction that actually feel groundbreaking. This is definitely one of those albums where you're thinking, what the fuck are they gonna do next? And the darkness continues into track 6, Smoke Don't Clear. Ritchie delivers a pretty demonic vocal as descending synths swamp the sound. Actually, the sound of his delivery kind of reminded me of Salem, the Witch House group, and you know, a lot of other Witch House from 10 years ago. Finally, that sound is being delivered with quite a bit more sophistication to dark but fantastic results. It's also really fascinating to me how they seem to be using multiple samples of Ritchie's voice in the beat, while he's also rapping on top of it. It creates this kind of crazy collage of his voice in all different tones. It definitely adds to the disorientating feeling that they're going for. I think Top Picks for You has the clearest set of lyrics on the album so far. At least they're the ones that jumped out at me the most.
Pops up something you would have watched. I'm like, classic. This is some shit I would have seen you watch and it just laughed at.
I could be mistaken, but it sounded to me like Ritchie is talking about living on without Groggs. And this moment seems to indicate a change in the mood of the album. Although the extreme deconstruction of sound on the album does continue, it moves away somewhat from the noise and aggression into more emotional and mournful moods. I think the detuning synthesizers definitely ensure the disorientation continues. Track 8 is Wild Wild West, which is another extremely abstract track. And I think it was at this point it hit me how brave this album is. They really seem to have very little regard for the listener, compared to how a lot of their older stuff, as artistic as it could be, often sounded like you could play it at a party. But this stuff? I mean, the more chaotic feel of the earlier part of the album definitely makes a small cameo here. But that pretty much gives way in the next track. The first thing I noticed when Postpartum starts is that the sound is opened up. The barrage of noise that we've heard up till now is pretty much stripped away. Jeez, it sounds so clear and open after all that sonic chaos. The feelings of yearning continue from track 7, and it's pretty heavy. Feeling of desperation in it. But despite the huge amount of emotion in this song, the abstract nature of the sound continues. And it's pretty incredible actually how much feeling the song is able to carry despite being so bizarre. Postpartum was definitely one of my favorites on the album. By the time we reached track 10, the first single, Knees, what sounded like such a strange song when we first heard it seems to make perfect sense in the context of the album. It feels like the centerpiece of the album, like everything we've heard so far has been building up to this track, or that everything else was made around it or inspired by it.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
The sound is fantastic, apparently bolstered by a Black Midi sample. And that latest Black Midi album, 𝐒𝐢𝐬𝐽, is easily my favorite album of the year so far. So this was really a coming together of greatness for me. This song is actually pretty melodic and definitely has the most memorable tune of the whole album. Despite it being so loose and pretty chaotic, like most of the album, it will stick in your head. And like the song before it, it carries a lot of emotion. And that just leaves us with the last track, By Storm. That's a Brian Eno sample, right? Here Come the Warm Jets? Yeah, so they close out the album with a really prominent sample of the closing title track of Brian Eno's Here Come the Warm Jets. It's a really satisfying way to close the album. It was a perfect closer for Brian Eno. But in the case of this album, it really lifts the cloud of dark emotions that's been shrouding you for the majority of the album up to this point. So yeah, it works really well. So yeah, I had really high hopes for this album. Maybe my hopes were possibly too high, but I'm completely in love with it. I mean, Injury Reserve really stepped up to the plate here, and they've delivered something that feels so real. If this whole album had been full of nothing but the chaotic stuff that makes up the first half, I would have been thrilled with that. That would have been incredible. But the more emotional songs that show up in the second half lift this album up to something that feels really special. I'm sure that if Groggs were still here, we still would have got this masterpiece. As I alluded to earlier, I've been feeling that Injury Reserve have been working towards something special for quite a long time, that they were always on the verge of a breakthrough. So it feels really unfair actually that Groggs is not here to enjoy this moment of artistic triumph that he'd been working towards along with Parker and Ritchie. This is their moment. Instead, his loss itself has left its mark on the album. The album has an emotional weightiness as a result of what happened, but it stands as a tribute to Groggs as well as a monument for everything he left behind. Equally, Parker and Ritchie have definitely shown what they're capable of here, and whatever they decide to do next, I know we'll all be waiting for it with great excitement. I know I will be. Will they stay together as a group? Who knows? Whether they decide to continue as Injury Reserve together remains to be seen. But I'm sure the two of them will continue to work together in some way, because their partnership has clearly resulted in something incredible here. The masterpiece I always knew they had in them. So definitely a bittersweet victory for Injury Reserve, but we've definitely got here one of the best albums of the year. So please do follow me over on Twitch and join me for some listening parties. We'll re-listen to everything I listen to on this channel, and of course we will re-listen to this at some point. Follow me on Twitter to not miss out on updates on when I will be going live. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me with the link in the description to buy me a coffee. It helps me to be able to keep making these videos, helps me keep my channel going, so I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy. That was really something. Well, like I was saying earlier, that I was always wanting Injury Reserve to make something incredible. Like I always felt from the first time I heard them that they had the potential to make something outstanding. And it feels like they've done that. I really feel that this album is the one that they finally delivered, you know, which makes it all the more tragic that we lost Groggs, you know. He should be here. He should be here for when they've hit this pinnacle.